Alright, episode 3 of Demon Slayer. The first thing I noticed about this episode was he said there's several hundred members in the Demon Slayer Corps. So you have to think, if there's several hundred members, how many demons are out there? There's probably thousands upon thousands. So that gives us an idea of the world we're in this anime. The main thing about this episode is we get a glimpse into Tanjiro's journey and development. So he starts undergoing really intense training, and we see him falling asleep at his desk while he's writing his journal, so he's really exhausted and he's pushing himself in this training. And you have to admire how hard he's working. So the first time marker is 6 months later, and Nezuko is still asleep. You don't really know why she's asleep yet. I think it's interesting. And he goes through his whole training while she's still asleep. So he does all this without his support. So he's doing it on his own and on his own will and is on his own merit. So I think that's another admirable thing that we see in Tanjiro. After a year, his training's over, and Mr. Rokudaki says that he has nothing left to teach him, and he will not teach him anymore, and now it's up to Tanjiro to go on to the next level. So I think this is another important point, because here it shows that Tanjiro has to go to the next level on his own. We see now that Tanjiro has it in him to be a demon slayer. So he keeps training for 6 months, and he's trying to slice the boulder, and we see that his hands are raw and the skin's coming off. So this is just another affirmation of Tanjiro's work ethic, and we see that he really wants this. He wants to be a demon slayer, and he's willing to work hard for it. But when he makes no progress, he starts to doubt himself, and he says to himself, "Am I hopeless?" And then he says, "Keep working, Tanjiro. You can do it." So I like that because he has the self-doubt, but then he overcomes it. And then, coincidentally, that's right when the man in the fox mask appears. And when Tanjiro says, "I just can't go any further," the man in the fox mask says, "Go further." I like this because Tanjiro thinks he's at his limit, and then when the man in the fox mask says, "Go further," Tanjiro has to dig deep for it. He thinks he's at his limits, but that's just a mental barrier, and he can go further. He just has to break past that mental block. Tanjiro has so much untapped potential that he doesn't know is there, and this is the moment where he's finally going to start digging into that well of potential. And at one point, Makomo says to him, "Train to death. At the end of the day, there's nothing more you can do." So this is another insight into just hard work. So, and we have to assume that he takes that to heart because 6 months later is when he beats the man in the fox mask. So he does train incredibly hard. He never gives up, and he just has that work ethic. And we see that he really wants it. He really wants to be a demon slayer, and he will not give up. I think Tanjiro is easily a very admirable character. So 6 months later, it's been 2 whole years now, he battles Sabito and he wins. He wins in 1 strike. And I like the transition after 6 months. We see him with long hair, so we know that there's been a change in his person, in his character. And that's signaled by a physical appearance, but it's anything but physical that's changed with him. His whole mindset has changed. He knows he can dig deep. He knows he's surpassed his limits. He knows that he's come to the next level. It was interesting when he sliced off the fox mask and he had the same scar as Tanjiro. So we don't know how Tanjiro got the scar or the significance of it. But since the man in the fox mask, Sabito, had the same scar, it's definitely a significant thing. And I'm sure at some point we'll find out how he got the scar. And when he won, Sabito had a sad yet happy smile. And he described it as almost a relieved smile. So I think there's a couple ways to interpret this. I think it's a happy smile because he's finally got to the next level. He's finally ready to be a demon slayer, and he's happy that he's been able to achieve this. But I think it's also a sad smile because he's now doomed to a life of being a demon slayer. And the life of being a demon slayer is not going to be a fun life. It's a life of duty. It's a life of pain. And it's just a life of combat. He's chosen this path to be a warrior, and there's nothing left for him. Because when he becomes a demon slayer, that's who he is now. That's going to be his whole identity and his whole character. There's no other role for him to fulfill. The only role is his role as a demon slayer. And then Sabito disappears, and then we see that Tanjiro had actually sliced the boulder. So we think both Makomo and Sabito are in his head. I think we have to question whether it was in his head or not first. There's 2 options. 1, it was reality, and 2, it was all in his head. I don't think it was real because of the position of his body. So when he slices Sabito's mask, the next thing you know, he sliced the boulder. He's not going to slice Sabito's mask and then slice the boulder without remembering it. That's just not the way it's going to work in the anime. So I think it was all in his head. And then we have to analyze why these two characters. I think Makomo was to help him. It was the part of his mind manifesting to help him master all the techniques. Because we never saw him fight Makomo. It was always Sabito. So Makomo was just helping him master the techniques he learned. And then Sabito was the part of his mind manifesting to help him overcome and push to the next level. Sabito was the one that helped him push past the barriers, climb the walls, and get to that inner strength. Overall, I think it was a good episode. We saw 2 years of progress in one episode. And we see how Tanjiro has changed really a lot in those 2 years. But it's all from a place of his own character and his own personality. Because we see that he really never gives up. He's a hard worker, and because of that, because he's a hard worker and he never gives up, that's what brought him to be able to slice the boulder in the end. So I think we're going to see a lot from Tanjiro, and I can't wait for his first real fight, and we'll see the fruits of all his labor. And I think Tanjiro is a really good character for this anime because it shows you what you can achieve from hard work. I think this anime has been great so far, and I can't wait for the next episodes.